So for everyone who hasn't been here before, welcome. Yay, new people, new folks. So this is actually our last T2 of the semester, but it's our weekly drop-in event where we gather to talk about feminist issues, connect with new folks on campus, all the things. So our host this week is Dr. Shannon Orr. She's a professor in the Department of Political Science. She's also an affiliate faculty member in the WGSS department, and she is the coordinator for the Masters of Public Administration program as well. So I'm excited because I know that you do so much work, both inside and outside of campus. So if you could even start by just talking a little bit about all the positions that you hold on campus and kind of what your involvement looks like. I think that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, sure. Well, and first, thank you so much for inviting me. This is such a fun thing to do, particularly during a pandemic. And and thank you for everybody for taking some time out of I know this is like kind of a really stressful and busy time, and it's the last week of classes and, in quarantine, and it's hard to put emotional and mental bandwidth together sometimes to show up to things that are optional. So thank you. This is really really means a lot. So I'm a full professor in the political science department, and I am the graduate coordinator for the Masters of Public Administration program. This is my 15th year at BGSU and my 14th as grad coordinator, actually, and affiliated faculty. And as you just said, and also I do a lot of work with the Center for Public Impact. So I've kind of an ongoing fellow with that office, and I do lots of kind of stuff outside of academia related to my academic work. So the longer I've been at BGSU, the more I've kind of looked at how I can kind of get my nose out of a journal, and I still do research and write and all that kind of stuff, and that stuff's important and a requirement, but I really tried to, and I think partly the freedom of becoming a full professor is to also be able to say that I really am going to chart my own path. And BGSU has been very supportive of that. So I'm pretty lucky.
Yeah, no, that sounds really cool. I know I've seen a few things how you do service learning a lot in your classes. So kind of how did that come about, like those partnerships?
Yeah, so when I first started at BGSU, actually hadn't even quite finished my dissertation. So, moved here, whole kind of complicated life story because I had moved here from Alberta, where my husband and I were living, and we're Canadian, and his visa didn't come through in time. So he actually ended up having to move back to Canada for a year, and I was finishing up my PhD in Detroit. And there's like this seminal moment in my life when I was crossing the border. He couldn't come to the US at all. So we'd bought a house in BG. He was living in Windsor in his parents' basement. I was trying to finish up my dissertation at Wayne State. And I drove through the border, and the border guard says to me, like, hey, so I'm a little confused by your documents. And I and he said, you have Alberta plates. He said, what were you doing in Windsor? I said, well, I was visiting my husband because he's waiting for his visa to come through. And he said, well, where do you live? And I said, well, I live in Ohio. And he said, well, but why are you shown as a frequent crosser? And I said, well, it's because I'm finishing up my PhD in Detroit. And the border guard looked at me. He said, I'm so sorry for you. Just go, 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 go. And I thought, I'm at a moment in my life where like the border guards are sorry for me. Like, what have I done? Um, and so throughout all that very, very stressful kind of first few years, I also realized that I really wanted to use my opportunity of having like the privilege of being a professor and being on the tenure track to start to do more, because it's really exciting when you first publish your first journal article, right? And then you look and you think, okay, like 10 people read it, and it gets cited by some people, and I started to see that I kind of wanted to do a little bit more. I'd always thought that I was going to go into development work, and women's issues and NGOs, and instead I went into academia. And so I really kind of wanted to see how I could do more as an academic. And I went to a conference, and I went to a meeting, a session on doing service learning. And so this is 15 years ago. And service learning was kind of a new idea. I had never done any of it in any of my classes. I didn't know anybody who had done any of it. And it sounded like it was kind of a neat idea. And I thought it gives students some practical experience. And so I did my first project. It was actually working with TMACOG, the Toledo Metropolitan Area Council of Governments, on some transportation, youth and transportation, and as part of their strategic planning. And it was pretty much a complete and total disaster. And I basically messed it up from start to finish. And then I realized that sucked, and now I need to rethink. But the students liked the idea, even though it was kind of a train wreck. And so I thought I need to figure out how to do this better because I think this is really what I want to do. And so over kind of some trial and error, I got better at it. I read a lot. I talked to lots of people. I went to lots of seminars about how to run projects and that kind of stuff. And then started to build kind of a network locally of community partners. And so I've completely lost track, but I know in my classes I've had more than 100 different projects. Um, so now I kind of joke that we're kind of like a machine. Um, but it's kind of funny because people look, I think, at the work that the students do, and people are really impressed, and we make it look easy, but it's not. And it took many years of like epic failures. And every once in a while, we still have one that just for whatever reason, whether it's the client or the students or circumstances, they kind of end up as a failure, but that's okay. And I tell students like sometimes the failure ones are the ones where we all learn the most from them. But to their credit, although I still have 3 more projects to get for this semester, like they've all handled the pandemic, even though it's been kind of a train wreck after a train wreck experience for some of the projects, they've all handled it really well.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's impressive. That's a lot of work to do, especially to kind of go back and think, okay, it didn't work the first time. Now I have to keep trying, as opposed to being like, this is ridiculous. I'm not doing this anymore. Um, so how much is it now? A combination of you reaching out, or sure people in BG know a lot of the great work that you do. So how much of it is people reaching out to you, or you reaching out to them, or vice versa?
So now we have a pretty good reputation among the community. So usually I have kind of a backlog of projects of people that have reached out to say, can you, here's something, can you help us with that? And then sometimes I do reach out just because I want, maybe like a diversity of projects. But the most exciting one last spring, well, I guess it was actually last in fall, I don't even know what year we are in, 2020, 2019. So in fall 2018, I got a phone call from NASA, and NASA called and said, hey, we heard you do these projects. We heard about it from somebody else who you've done a project with, the uh, the Lake Erie Islands and Shores group. We had done a business retention study for them, and um, said, hey, we're really interested in, a project. We have this idea about a rocket garden. Could could you help us? And you don't say no to NASA. So we said, yeah, of course. And we did a first project in my capstone class for the public administration program last spring, and then we did phase 2 in the fall, and now the students are finishing up phase 3 of the project, which has now kind of grown a lot. So we're working on some like public science engagement um, stuff in Sandusky. There's a NASA testing facility in Sandusky called Plumbrook, and so we're working on that project. So that's a case of like somebody had heard about the work that the students do and really was interested in something for themselves. So that's cool, and we'll never turn down NASA, but we will continue at least for a couple more rounds on that project. But we try and mix things up because I want students to have the opportunity to do work in an area that they're really interested in. So we do, for instance, a lot of evaluation work. So this semester in my class, we're working with the National Museum of the Great Lakes, on a big sort of membership study, surveying all their members, and then doing a comparative membership study with other similar kind of marine museums around the U.S. So, but that was one actually that I reached out to them because I thought we needed something a little. I knew we had some students who were interested in kind of uh, museum work in the future, and so I thought they might be a good client, and so they jumped on board.
That's exciting. Um, I that made me think about kind of coming from the student's perspective. I love that you said that you kind of are thinking about what's going to appeal to them and like what are their interests as far as long-term career goals or just something that they're interested in just generally. What does it look like to kind of prepare the students to be able to do this type of work? Like, I don't know how many students come in like, yes, service learning, this is why I took this course, or if they're like, I don't really know about this extra piece we got going on.
Yeah, it kind of varies. Now, I think part of it, like in our program, that students know that that's what they're getting into. Like that's kind of so our program's been like recognized nationally for the work that we do, and so they come in knowing that that's going to be something that they're going to do. Um, and one of the things about our projects is that they're always small group projects. So one of the most important things, and this I have learned the hard way, because I've had in the past, I had a lot, students come into a group project and they all say, I hate group projects. And
Mm,
and I've really struggled with thinking about why is it that they hate them, and some of it is you know students who don't do the work, and that's really frustrating. And I thought, well, why is it that students don't do the work? Well, sometimes, yeah, sometimes they're a slacker. Okay, fine. I can't save them all. But sometimes I think students don't do the work because they're intimidated, they are insecure, and I think sometimes they don't do the work because the people in the group don't let them, right? You get the one person who has a very strong opinion about themselves and their abilities, and they don't trust anybody else in the group to do the work, so they do it all. And then they get upset because they're the ones who always have to do the work. And so I really kind of spent a long time trying to figure out like what was going on with our group dynamics. And then sometimes students, just personality clashes and whatnot. And so one of the things now that I do that I never used to do is I spend a lot of time talking about group dynamics. And I just had our students do reflections on their experiences uh, in these group projects this semester. And I can see the students now using the language that I have built into my training for students to do group projects. So one of the things that I said to them is, first of all, I refer to them as teams. So they're Team NASA or Team Parks and Rec, and Team Metro Parks. Um, and the idea that, when you're on a team, you bring out the best in each other. And so if one of your team members is struggling, rather than just complaining about them, what is everybody else doing to bring out the best in them? And I think that's kind of a light bulb moment for a lot of the students in the class to say, oh, I shouldn't just be pointing fingers and running to the professor to say, you know, this person is a slacker and not doing their work. It's on me to say to the slacker, hey, what's going on and what do you need? And ever since I started building that into my class, the group dynamics piece has changed like radically. And another piece that I have students that I call them out on when they do their group presentations at the end. Um, some of the students will say, and then I did this, and then I did this, and because they divide up the presentations based on kind of the pieces that they were primarily responsible for. And I tell the students that you don't say I because you're a team and you did this as a team. And I get it. Like if you're really proud of a piece that you did, you want people to know that, but it doesn't matter because your team did that. So you need to find a way to take pride in your own work, um, without shining a spotlight on you because it was a team initiative. And so if everybody is so caught up in, well, this is mine and this is mine and this is mine and this is mine, the projects aren't as good because I can tell who wrote each individual piece. They don't flow, they're not seamlessly integrated. They're written in different voices. And that doesn't make for a very good team project. Like, sure, some people have different strengths and maybe there are some pieces that one person really did and took the leadership on. Well, then the team should be celebrating the work that that person did, not because that's what teams do, but the audience and your clients should be celebrating the team as a whole. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that has really changed, I think, the idea of the group dynamics. And so if somebody says, hey, this person isn't doing, the work that they should be, or we're having some conflicts with this person or whatever, well, then ask them what they need. Just turn to your group member and say, hey, I think, I've noticed you haven't met the deadlines we set. What do you need? And maybe it's they're dealing with personal struggles or whatever, but as a team you can almost always work it out. And it's just and I think that's the most important piece, I think, now, for getting students ready to do the project. So it's not so much the technical skills, like we can do that, like it's easy for me to take a couple minutes and teach them how to do qualitative coding or to talk about survey design or those, but it's that those softer skills, I think, that now I've realized really we have to invest in our students, that kind of stuff at the very beginning. So and I always tell students too that there needs to be a certain amount of humility in the work that you do, and thinking about your client, not just about yourself, and thinking about the ways in which you do your writing, and you recognize that if you're working, if you're doing an evaluation, you don't know, everything. So we're doing an eval if I'm trying to think of like we did some work with the Toledo Symphony, for example, and it was a national study of youth symphonies and how, particularly kind of how they did their audition processes. And no one in the group, only one student in the group had ever been in a youth symphony. So, it was to kind of instill in my students the idea that you have a lot to learn. And so you want to, do the research and talk to people and don't just assume that, you're going in with expertise that you don't have.
I love so much of what you just said. I feel like there are a million professionals that need to hear that too. I see Amy nodding.
Well, and
I
us,
just
we don't do that.
I was writing
oh,
things down. I wrote it
taking
down.
notes. Yeah.
It's like,
Well,
oh,
and
this is for me. I need to write this down.
yeah, just because I feel like a lot of times students and professionals alike, it's like conflict avoidant. Like people don't want to have those conversations because they feel like then I don't know, they feel like it's conflict rather than having a conversation about like, what's going on? How can I help? It's just like that person's out to get me or something. I don't know. And we always talk to students about like, you need to do these group projects so you're prepared for the real world because you're going to have to work in teams and, you're always going to have these group projects, but we don't ever, you do. A lot of people don't teach them how to do that. They just
And
say you need to learn to do it. Go do it.
I never used to. And then I realized why, like, what's going on here? Why isn't this working? And I thought it's because they don't know how.
Mhm.
And no
I
one's
think,
taught them that. We just
yeah.
throw them into the groups and say, go work. And people, like other faculty members, were sending their groups to me. And I was like, why am I solving what am I missing here? And then I realized it's that, and reiterating that like over and over and over again throughout the semester, and trying to model that too for our students.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
we've all had terrible group experiences, right? And a
yeah.
lot of it is because of ego and trying to claim credit and blame people for other things, And but you don't do that, so Amy knows I curl, and um, so when you curl, you're on a team of 4 people, and you're a team. And yeah, individuals might, kind of make a mistake, but you don't. It it's not a good team that blames in other individuals for, blowing a shot or something. It's like one person. There's the skip who calls the shot. There's the person who throws the rock, and there's the 2 people who sweep. And where the rock ends up is a combination of all 4 of those people coming together. So I tell my students, I use that as kind of an analogy to help. You're one saying, let's try this shot, the other one throws the rock, and 2 of you are sweeping. And if the 4 of you don't work well together, you're not going to score the points. Then they all roll their eyes because they're sick of hearing about curling.
But I think too, a lot of times we probably set it up for them to not work together, because at the end you can all give each other a grade, and I'll take that into consideration when I decide your final grade. I've had a lot of professors who did that, because then you feel like, the students feel like they have some control over it or something, but it really does kind of set them up to be individualized instead of like working as a team. So
yeah, now imagine if we had students give themselves a team grade. And then, then that kind of changes the way that they, I think about things. And I always tell students, like, that with these community projects, I think it's a little bit different, because yes, there's a grade, but they also know that, like, NASA is going to be looking at this project. And so the motivation is very different.
That's really cool. I know I think about that a lot, like when I feel like the messages that I received as an undergrad about how to like survive group projects is very much like, oh, you just need to take over and like do whatever you want. And then like that's how you'll get through it, when like probably not the best option for everyone involved and for success of everyone. So I really like that idea of like building that into the class and building that into the skill set that students are improving upon. But I guess kind of going off that, what would your advice be to a faculty member who is nervous about service learning or wants to try it for the first time? Like, what advice would you have for them?
So, I give a lot of talks on how to do these kinds of things, and it's really interesting. Like, I gave a talk at the so our professional association for public administration programs is called NASPA, and it's the NASPA network of association of schools of public policy and administration. And it's only kind of graduate directors. So and it's the whole conference is all about running MPA programs and teaching in MPA programs. It's not about there's not really like research into how public administration. It's all very program management focused. And so this is a group of people who are pretty into service learning, and so I gave a talk. I was asked to give a talk on how I do it and whatnot. And like half the people in the audience were like, "Oh no, there's no way my students could do this. What you're talking about, no." And I was like, "What? Like, why? You're not even going to try?" And to give them the opportunity to build their resumes and get some practical experience and do hard things, and they're like, "Oh no, that's just not going to work." And so I think like my first piece of advice would be that it's okay to fail, because oh my gosh, I've failed so many of these. Not I've gotten much better at them, but in the beginning, I mean, I messed up a lot, and that was okay, and the students still always got something out of it. Maybe it wasn't what I had intended, and I've learned from all of those mistakes. And then I think building on that is to talk to other people who do it, because everyone I know who does this kind of work is so passionate about it. And if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm thinking of doing this," like I am fully all in on like, how can I help? Because I want to help people to avoid making the same mistakes I did. I still make lots of mistakes, that's for sure. But I kind of have a bigger toolbox now of how to fix them. But definitely to talk to people who've done that, because you don't need to now in 2020, you don't need to, reinvent the wheel. And there are also lots of different models for how to do this. So I definitely have one very particular model where we work with a client, and we do a semester long project, and then at the end of it there's like a deliverable. But there are definitely lots of different models for service learning. So you kind of want to find the one that works best for kind of your teaching and your personality. Um, I tend to be very, very hands off on the projects. But I also realized that part of that is because my students now mentor each other. So, like this semester, so I have 5 projects this semester. I had 5 projects in the fall, 6 projects in the fall. So about half my class has already done a project with me. And so I make sure when I divide up the groups that the students, that there's at least one student in each group who has already done a project with me so that they know how it works and they can mentor the other students. Um, but that idea of thinking about that there are so many different models out there, and they can be, much smaller initiatives than kind of these really big, let's design a public science garden for NASA kind of thing. Like I couldn't have done that 10 years ago. That would have, I didn't have the skills and the tool set. I'm big into I'm big into toolboxes with my students, so I didn't have the toolbox to know how to do that and the skill set. And it took me a long time to be able to build up the confidence in the students that they would be able to, work pretty independently. So, definitely talking to others, being okay with failure, talking with others who have been there and asking for some help and some mentoring, I think is so, so key. And then I think the third one is being really honest with your students. And so talking about, that it's okay to struggle, that it's okay to do hard things, it's okay to make mistakes. If I make a mistake, I try to be really open with the students, say like, I messed up, this is, what we need to do to fix it. You know, that I think that kind of I think those 3 things are sort of the key to starting into service learning, and knowing that it really is okay to fail.
Do you think that's what the professionals who were saying, "Oh no, my students aren't ready for that," like, do you think that's what their fear is, or like what is driving that fear?
Yeah, I think it was more about them. It's and because it is like it's scary. It's like I don't tell my students this, but in some ways, like my professional reputation is on the line. If they mess up with NASA, like not that I need NASA, but I love NASA, so love NASA. So I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid. I actually like wrote to NASA when I was 7, and I said like, my name is Shannon, and I'm 7. I live in Canada, and I want to be an astronaut. What do I need to do? And they like sent me this box. I still have it in my parents' attic of like, it was like a box of like swag, like pictures and like pins and like amazing, just amazing stuff. And like these full, I had them all over my wall, like these full color photographs like that astronauts had taken and stuff. And there was like a book about like space. It was pretty amazing. So like this is, but I would say I did not, although I did my master's thesis on outer space policy. So like a little tiny part of me still wants to be an astronaut, but I'm a political scientist through and through. So, but you know, so if I don't, I mean, if the students completely mess up the project and whatever, like it's fine. I will survive. I don't really need NASA, but in some ways, I mean, their name is on the projects, but I'm the link, and it's they're doing these in my classes. So, so it's risky, and if something goes horribly wrong, then I'm the contact for it. If they give bad data, their analyses are wrong, or they piss off a board member or something like that. I'm the one who, kind of takes the hit for that. And I actually, now that I think about it, I did have a project that there was a big data error that I didn't catch. And then the client called me after they had turned the project in and like was very upset about it. And I apologized and the students fixed it. And then I was invited to speak. Somebody else invited me to speak at that organization. And I said, sure, I'd love to. And then a couple days later, they took back that invitation to speak because the person that client said no. So yeah, whatever. Like I don't have time, for that kind of uh whatever. It's all that was all, water under the bridge. I was disappointed because I was and I had, whatever, had lots of great ideas, but whatever. It's fine. So I think for some faculty it is. I mean, yeah, it could be, additional stress. It's certainly a lot of extra work and there's no compensation for all that. But the rewards I think are totally worth it. But it's tough and particularly I think when you have faculty who are kind of like my generation of faculty, right? We never did any of those kinds of things and active learning, service learning. So when you're being asked to step outside of your, little comfort zone in terms of teaching, that's pretty tough. It's tough for my students. It's tough for, everybody.
Yeah. Do you know, so I'm sure since I don't know if you can answer this, I know you work with the Center for Public Impact now. But are they able to kind of like help make this connection between like faculty and like what part can the Center for Public Impact play in kind of making those connections?
Oh, they're amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, they have ton, so I kind of got started doing this just as they were starting to form the office. It used to be the Office of Service Learning. And so they are fantastic with helping people to find connections. I've gotten lists from them when every once in a while, like things kind of dry up. So they have, contact lists. They also have some pretty amazing mentoring programs as well. And they have a learning community for new faculty who are interested in doing this kind of stuff so that you can get some, mentoring and support and they help you to kind of work through the literature on service learning, community engaged learning, and to think about different models and ideas. So yeah, our Center for Public Impact is pretty amazing. And they're very connected to the broader community around service learning too. So opportunities to publish in journals and that kind of stuff. We're actually the MPA program and the Center for Public Impact, we're about to launch like today or tomorrow, probably tomorrow, I guess, an initiative for this summer. So we've kind of realized that the local nonprofits have really taken a huge hit with COVID-19. So big fundraisers canceled, lots of donors who are now out of work, or they're donors who have pivoted and are donating to things like Feeding America instead of other organizations that they used to donate to, like museums and arts and those kinds of things have taken a real financial hit with this with COVID-19. And at the same time, we have lots of students who have lost their internships, or there's no internships available because of remote work and just stress and kind of student, nonprofits being overwhelmed, and it's just hard to think about being able to supervise and mentor interns. So about half of my students have lost their internships in the last few weeks. So they were like, yes, hired and now canceled because of COVID-19 and even unpaid ones. I mean, so I'm always a big fan of paid ones, but that's not always possible. And some of even the unpaid ones have been canceled. So the MPA program and the Center for Public Impact we're creating a new program, and the only thing that's holding me back from launching it is that I need to change the name, and I haven't figured out a new name yet. So if anybody has any ideas, let me know. But basically, the idea is going to be that we're going to create, we're going to have 10 MPA students who will be, we're going to create cohorts. Will there be an MPA student as kind of a mentor, and then 2 undergrads paired up with that MPA student. And they will be linked with local nonprofits who need help with grant writing. And there's been a bunch of grants that have been created through the United Way and through the Center for Nonprofit Resources, the Toledo Community Foundation. And we have a lot of organizations who have never written a grant, don't have the capacity to do grant writing. And so we're creating this, which was going to be called the BGSU ARC program, Alliance for Recovery and Capacity Building, but I need to change ARC. So, because there's something else called ARC. But then the idea is that the students will work either 50 or 100 hours this summer. So I'm leading this program, and I'm going to be doing grant writing training with the students. So they'll learn how to write grants, they'll learn how to find grants, they'll learn how to do logic models, and we're going to invite the nonprofits to participate in all of those online trainings, so that they can also build their own capacity to do grant writing in the future. And then the students in their teams of 3, their little cohorts, will write a grant for a nonprofit that will be like submission ready. And so then the students, so depending on timelines and how long their commitment, either 50 or 100 hours. So they might just do 1, or they might do up to 3 grants over the summer. And so the idea being that BGSU can help support these nonprofits in our region who don't have the capacity to write grants. But at the same time, we're training grad students in mentoring and undergrads and both of them in grant writing. And that they'll actually be able to say, on their resumes that they wrote a grant for, 1 to 3 area nonprofits, food pantries, shelters, any of those kinds of things. And any organization that has the need for a grant and in which we can find a grant that they're eligible for.
Yeah, that's so cool. Oh my goodness. I love too that like the idea of them being able to have their staff a part of the same grant writing session. I know I was in AmeriCorps Vista for a year before starting my graduate program, so like hashtag sustainability all the time. So I love it.
Yeah, because we wanted to be able to, the idea that there's this capacity building piece to it. So it's not just supporting students and giving them this training, that we're going to make it available for free to area nonprofits. So they can jump on to the training. So there'll be, each section of the grant writing training will be offered multiple times, and I may record them as well and make them available. But grant writing training is really, really expensive in most places. And right now, we're in, a pandemic, and I think we at BGSU can really do something to really make a difference. And at the same time, give these students, so if the students sign up to do it for 100 hours, they can register for co-op 50, and it'll be an internship. So we've created 30 internships, for students at BGSU, and we're going to help some of the nonprofits in our region respond to, COVID-19 crisis. So, so I'm super excited about it. So we're going to announce it as soon as I come up with a new name. And that's what my family's charged to do over dinner tonight. And so then we're gonna launch it. And because we also need to recruit nonprofits and we need to recruit the undergrads. So I think it'll be a pretty great opportunity, and it's timely. So this isn't intended to be kind of a long-term program. It's a COVID-19 kind of BGSU response.
That's amazing.
I'm super excited.
Yeah, I have been working with, and I might pronounce his name wrong, Dr. Bhatti.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Because I'm on the I'm a trustee on the BG Community Foundation board, and so yeah, so the project that his students are doing, they're actually presenting to us tomorrow afternoon. Yeah. So but once we have that database of the individuals that have gotten grants from the BG Community Foundation, maybe we can work together to reach out to them to see if any of them might want students to help them with grants, because I imagine a lot of them would.
Yes. So the whole reason I came up with this whole idea is I started volunteering with Brown Bag Food Pantry here in town, because somebody told me that they've lost a lot of their volunteers because people are worried about getting sick. So So I thought, well, I don't do anything anymore, so I might as well go, you know, stack food, cans of food. So and it turns out that I knew one of the people there, and I was asking them about grant writing, and it turned out that they didn't have grant writing. They didn't write grants because they didn't have anybody who could write grants. So I offered to provide some help to a board member with writing a grant, and they got it. And so, and then they used it, and they got another one. And so, and then they were like, well, this isn't hard to write these kinds of grants. And I said, yeah, no, it's not. So it kind of stuck with me that there's so many organizations here who are doing great work, and they just have the capacity to do the grant writing piece. And at the same time, there's all these new grants that have popped up, particularly to respond to COVID-19. So and we've got grad students and undergrads who are desperate for the experiences, can't get internships. I mean, it's a pretty easy opportunity to put together.
Great, I saw you raise your hand in the chat.
I know it's so mysterious when I just like pop my hand up in my disembodied voice now in the WebEx. So two things. One, I'm not sure what the name of this is going to be, Shannon, but I do think that you need to have T-shirts that say, I don't really need NASA, I write grants. I think that would be a perfect slogan for just connect it all. So joking T-shirts, which I think would sell really great, aside. My question, I guess, I'm actually kind of going back to that story you told about that experience of crossing the border and kind of having that interaction where you're like, oh gosh, even the border guard is recognizing kind of what my life looks like. But so thinking about we've had a lot of like kind of obviously local issues in responding to COVID, but it's also like the local is the national, is the global, is the local. Like we're seeing kind of people experience this all over. So I'm kind of wondering how within service learning, how students are kind of being engaged like as like global stewards or global workers in the service that they do, like how we kind of expand both start at the local and then also move them to think globally.
Yeah, like I don't glocalism was kind of a trendy word for a while. Yeah, so one of the things that I also teach our well, every other year I teach our capstone class for the MPA program. And so one of the things that we do in that class is that we do a lot of work around resume writing and LinkedIn, and students have to put together these portfolios, which is a requirement for our accreditation, but also it helps them to kind of synthesize their entire program. And so one of the things that we really try and do is to think about what they have learned, so, okay, you did a project for the Glass City Marathon. Let's say you did a big, a sponsorship study and whatnot. What are the skills that you've learned out of that experience that you could then apply, beyond that small project? And so, I guess I hadn't really thought very much about helping students in the moment see the bigger picture. And maybe I think that's a really interesting thing I'm going to think about for a while. And maybe see if I can build that in, because I think sometimes I get so focused on the small picture of like, let's get these projects done and we have a semester and like, where's your survey? It's got to be mailed out, and that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of thinking out loud here, but I really like that that idea, Greg, of thinking about connecting students with their local work into some of the bigger picture stuff. We've done, different projects around, social justice and stuff as well. We've done one international project, long, complicated story, but we ended up we did a project for the Minister of Economic Development in Cape Town, South Africa, around shanty fires. And that was actually a fairly early project that we did, and I would do it very, very differently now. But I think we have tended to be probably very narrowly focused, and then thinking about the skills, taking those skills that they develop around teamwork and interview skills and resume writing, and report writing and survey design, and so I guess I have no answer, although I just talked a lot, because I think that's a piece maybe that we could, the next step of what we could do is to think about how these fit into kind of a broader context in the world and not just within our kind of little narrow community. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I don't know if any other folks had some last minute questions. Trying to think. I think my last question, I guess, is just what has been like the impact for you, like on your career, or how you think about your career and how that's impacted your interest in service learning and your engagement in service learning with your students, like has it impacted?
Yeah. Well, it's made me, I think, much more focused on a bigger picture and on kind of the bigger world by getting out of kind of my office. And it's not in any way to trash talk traditional academic work. And I do that. I have a book under review, like I still do that kind of, theoretical work. That stuff is really, really important. But I think I started to recognize that for me wasn't as satisfying. Um, and I really enjoy some of the more applied work. And I'm really grateful that BGSU is able to let me do that kind of stuff. So last 2 years ago, I guess I co-chaired the review of the city charter. And BGSU, I was able to count that as like scholarship of engagement, like research for my kind of research requirements. Um, and so I'm really grateful that BGSU recognizes that, I mean, they get some good publicity out of it too, and good and community connections, but that they will let me use some of that stuff as I try not to push the boundaries too much. And I still, I mean, I my book on Asian carp, the politics of Asian carp and invasive fish species in the Great Lakes is like my passion, and I still love that academic work, but the service learning piece has really become really important to me, and it's why in this summer I decided that I really wanted to develop this BGSU not ARC program, because I felt like right now in 2020 with a pandemic I couldn't spend the summer sitting down and writing about policy theory. This was not the summer for that. This is the summer to like find ways to support the community and to support our students. And policy theory work isn't going anywhere. And then so once I can kind of focus my attention on those kinds of things, then I'll maybe like spin back. But service learning, like I'm all in, like and always will be. Like I can't imagine not doing this kind of work with my students, um and knowing that here we are, like small town, regional state university, but the students, the work that they have done has been cited nationally. Students did one project that was referenced in congressional testimony. They do great things, and they do um, um, things better than they thought they could be. So, it's pretty awesome to have the opportunity to watch students grow in that way and to really challenge themselves and to like, they finish a report and I kind of go through it, make suggestions and edits or whatever, and then they finish the final report and inevitably they're pretty proud of what they did. So, and I don't remember when I was a grad student ever really being super proud of anything that I did. I wrote essays, I kind of churned stuff out. There were some projects I did that I really liked, but I don't remember ever having other than like my thesis and my dissertation, I guess, being able to like look at something I did in a class and be like, oh, I love this. So, that's a pretty rare opportunity. So I'm all in 100%. So, yeah, so I'm pretty lucky. Long story short, I'm pretty lucky.
I think one of my favorite things about these too is to hear from faculty like their passions and the energy behind them. And so thank you for sharing that. It's exciting to hear all of that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I will be in touch once we launch the BGSU Not ARC program about getting some nonprofits who could use some help, because the BG Community Foundation grant is also an option. So students could write it now and then it could be submitted, in September when that's due. So
Yeah, because we typically don't get a ton of grant applications either.
I know, and
So,
the curling, I keep writing them for the, you've given 2 to the curling club, and I think we've probably maxed out.
yeah, that's part of what the this project with the MPA students is that, you know, we tend to have the same group of people that apply and get grants, and we need to diversify a little bit, make sure that we're actually getting the word out to more than just the same people. So yeah,
Yeah. Yep, we're all in.
thank you.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for everyone for coming out. Thank you to Shannon. I'm sure your students appreciate all the work that you do, and it was really cool to learn a little bit more about it on our end. So hopefully you guys will be back to hang with us next semester. Fingers crossed that we'll be in person, but if not, we'll be back on WebEx next semester. But thank you guys so much. Bye.